This is Dr. Carroll, and this video is a continuation of the File I/O series, talking about file input. Now with file input, we have two main choices for reading files. We could use the buffer reader class or use the scanner class, and this builds off of another video that I made about using files with the scanner objects. So let's first talk about the buffered reader class. And so this is commonly used for reading contents from a file. And in my other video I mentioned about how buffering really improves I/O performance and therefore the overall performance of the program. Let's look at the documentation for buffered reader. So it inherits from the Java I/O reader class. And then let's look at its constructor. Oh, it takes in a reader. Okay. And now let's look at its methods. Okay, so not a lot here. We can read a single character, we can read a line. Wow, that's not a lot. There's just a few there. Okay, so let's look at the general usage now for a buffered reader class. And so we typically declare the buffered reader object and name it what we want, in this case file reader. And then we'll create a new one by calling new buffered reader. And as we just saw, the constructor can take in a reader, so we'll give it a new file reader, and to that we will give it the file name. So now we've created one, and so then we can read a line from the file reader and store that into a string. And then once we're done, and we'll probably do that in a loop, and we'll do it until line is null, and then we will close the file reader. So that's the general usage. Open it up, read from it, and then close it. So let's look at an example. Here we have the address parser simple. Let's go to that. Okay, so what this program does is it reads in simple addresses from a file that the user specifies. And by simple, we mean that it's going to fit the format of 3 lines and only 3 lines, and that they're going to be separated by a blank line. So if there was a second address line or something like that, we'd have to change this to account for that. Have a growing list of imports. Here we just have a main. So we're going to prompt the user for a file name, get the file name, try to open the file, read all the addresses one at a time, really one line at a time, and then close the file. Let's get user input, and we're going to create a buffered reader. We set it to null, and we do need to set it to null so the compiler doesn't complain. Here's our temporary line 1, 2, 3 for our addresses, scrolling up. So now we try to get input from the user for the file name, then we try to open that file. Now this file may or may not open correctly, it may not exist, and so that's why we definitely need this in the try. Now notice what is going on here. It's a little bit of, we're doing 2 or 3 things here. So we have our buffered reader here, and we're saying, hey, give us a line from the buffered reader and put that in line 1, assuming that it's valid, it's going in line 1. Now this is in parentheses, so what the assignment operator is going to return is whatever it assigns. So we say, hey, is line 1 while it's not null? So that's kind of a lot going on there. We could have pulled it out, but you'll see it commonly written this way. And the reason is try and get it and test to see if it's not null, so that we have it all right together there. And so we could have broken this out, putting this on the line before. Let's do that. And then here we would just have line 1 not equal to null, but notice if we do that, then we need to, at the bottom of the loop, repeat it so that we have it here. So maybe you feel like this is easier to read, maybe not. And so But notice then we have the read line in two different places. So while it's not null, and that's how we know it's done reading the file, it says, hey, I don't got any more. So what's the valid thing it returns? Because it can't return an empty string, because that's a valid input. In fact, we actually get an empty string here, but we ignore it. So you can't just return an empty string to say, hey, I don't have anything. So it just returns null reference, saying this doesn't reference a string, it references no string at all. Okay, so that was a lot about that, but that's an important concept to know when it's done reading the file. So we read in line 1, we read in line 2, line 3, read in a blank line hopefully, and then we're going to display the address. Here we could have done something else. We could have given it to a mailer, we could have analyzed it for some other purpose, but here we're just going to display it because this code is about demonstrating buffer reader and not about processing addresses really. So we can catch a file not found exception, an input mismatch exception, which is from our scanner.next, or anything else. Now, when we're done reading in all of those lines, we should close the file. So we make sure, one, did it open? Maybe we had a input mismatch exception before we even tried to open it, or maybe we tried to open it, it didn't exist, and so it was null. But so we need to try to close it because it can throw its own exception. So here in all its glory is our try catch block in our finally block. Okay, let's see it. And I'm going to compile it, and then we're going to give it this this file, which has some addresses in it: Jane Doe, Hiram Smith, my namesake, drove by his house this summer, a non-compliant address, we'll see that later on. Uh-oh, notice the White House, we didn't specify Washington, D.C. here, and then John Doe. So, let's see what happens there. Okay, let's compile it. Address parser simple.java. Woohoo! It compiles. We run it, says, hey, what file name do you want to give it? Okay, notice it found Jane Doe, Anytown, Hiram Smith, Nauvoo, non-compliant, no name, Colorado. That's a real city, by the way. It's kind of weird as you drive by. It says on the highway, no name, exit here. Look it up. We have missing city here, and then notice what happened here. Uh-oh, everywhere else it gave the name of it, and so this is off here. That's not good. Okay, let's go back to our notes, see if we can improve on that.
It's 9 o'clock.
All right, so that was buffered reader. Now let's talk about the scanner class. So for the scanner class, we can create a scanner object with more than just system.in, which is typically the keyboard. It has constructors for files, input streams, strings, and other things. And of course, you can see the documentation to get more information about that. And the reason to use scanner class is it has a lot of options to be able to parse the text. It has next, next double, next int, next line, and others. And so it has a much richer set of methods to parse the input than just a buffered reader. Now you're wondering, okay, that's all the advantages, what's the disadvantage? The disadvantage is that it's not synchronized, or said differently, thread safe. Meaning you can't have multiple instances in your program working at the same time. And this is in contrast to buffered readers. You can do this. You can have multiple buffers working together in multiple threads. Now if you're like, I don't even know what a thread is, well then you don't have to worry about it because you obviously don't have more than one thread. But you will learn about that more in the future, or when you do, Just remember, scanner objects are not thread safe. So if you have multiple threads, you want to stay away from scanner. Okay, let's see an example. Okay, address parser, dropping the simple. So this is going to read in simple addresses, but notice we are able to, instead of line 1, line 2, line 3, with first name, last name, street number, street string. Now this is assuming an American format. If you're familiar with address in other places, they don't necessarily fit this, but in America they do. Then city, a 2-letter, state, and then a 5-digit zip code. Okay, and zip code is a registered mark. So our growing list of imports, scrolling up. So prompt the user for a username, get the file name, try to open the file, read all the valid addresses, close the file. That sounds familiar. Okay, but here our temp address variables are all of these because we're going to be able to tease out each one of these individually. So scrolling up, so the try, again, get the input. Here we're saying new scanner, but we're passing it a file reader, passing it the file name. And here, to know, how do we know we're done? We say, well, does it have something else? We just do the has next, because our next one is a next, and so that's very fitting. So we get a first name, last name. We get an integer here for the street number. We get the rest of the line. We get a city. Notice this does only allow for a single name city. Sorry, all you New Yorkers and people from Los Angeles and Peachtree City, etc. And then state, and then zip code has to be an int. And so here we're forcing some formatting, and then we can display this address, and we're going to display it in the format that we would expect it. Now, so now we might have a greater chance of having an input mismatch exception. For example, if we can't find an int here, or the zip code's not an int, things like that, then we're going to have a problem. Okay, and notice we don't worry about the blank line because the next is going to ignore preceding white space. And then if it's not null, then we try to close it. Okay, you don't need to close scanner when it's system.in, but when it's a file, you do want to close it. Okay, let's see if it compiles. Woohoo! It compiles. Okay, let's give it the same file name, which we've seen. Oh, notice we got Jane Doe, we got Hiram Smith, but the next one was, let me just cat that here for you. The next one was the non-compliant address. If we do ONE here instead of 1, it said it wasn't able to parse that input because it was a lot more refined of a parser. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it.